Hello there, ladies, gentlemen and unicorns. This is part 4 of my video about my making of the Ludum Dare 41 keynote, and today I'll be taking you behind the curtain where all the visual digital effects, the magic happened. But first I needed to have a finished edit. Until producing the keynote, usually I would finish filming first and then start editing and maybe do some reshoots. But this time this was just too risky. If a scene wouldn't work, I would need to know it right away and reshoot it, ideally with everything still set up. So my post-production workflow was like this. I'd finish up a scene and then wrangle the footage, which means just copying it and making sure that I have everything, then sync up video and audio and start editing until the scene was done, or I would fall asleep on the keyboard. Because of the preparation with all the storyboards before, the whole edit was pretty much an exercise of paint by numbers. It was very straightforward. Of course, there were some minor tweaks, but I was pretty much done with the edit as I was done with shooting. Of course, I had a lot of placeholders and still so much green screen shots in there, but that was actually good, because once I had my edit pretty much locked down, I could start working on the visual effects shots because I knew how long they were and which take to use. In addition to the simple split screen shots, there were, I think, around 33 shots in need of visual effects, or VFX. Transitioning into and out of the time tunnel itself, Minecraft, MEGAMAN, Chrono Trigger, METROID, an explosion were the obvious ones. And on top of those obvious shots, there were a few shots in need of so-called invisible effects. That are shots that look like nothing had been done to them, but there had been, usually to fix a problem or two. For example, in the arrival shot in this scene here, I was overlapping myself for a couple of frames, so I needed to manually cut out Future Phil's arm. This process of manually cutting out portions in an image is called rotoscoping, or roto for short. And I had a lot to roto and patch. Let's take this scene. For one thing, I forgot to switch on Future Phil's shoes, no biggie. I had plenty of reference from other shots, and Future Phil's feet didn't move in the shot, so I could paint a patch in Photoshop to slap on, and that was it. Done. But there was a bigger issue still. During the shoot, I carelessly repositioned the light in the background and never bothered to check whether it was visible to the camera until I was done. Luckily, I had taken a still photograph of the scene with the light still hidden, so at least I had a so-called clean plate. What made matters worse was that current Phil was acting right in front of the light. So instead of just throwing a patch on it, I had to rotoscope myself frame by frame in all 3 shots, which took way longer than a reshoot might have taken. And this is a long shot where I'm just standing here and then walking and then turning and walking in the frame. So yeah, it's a whole lot of just roto stuff to do because I was complete dumbass and didn't clear the frame properly. By the way, if you're wondering about my getup here, I'm getting married today. Woohoo! Still got some time to do some rotoscoping, so way to go. To transport myself into the world of Minecraft, first I needed, well, a world in Minecraft. In a new world from a random seed, I flew around for a long time, until I finally discovered a hilltop from which you could see the sunset like the script required. I whacked weeds, planted saplings, and sprinkled on bone meal to digitally dress the set until it looked like what I had in mind, thanks to my storyboards. From a couple of different perspectives, I recorded nightfall to use as background and finally the death by creeper. By the way, the game footage you just saw was in reenactment because, well, once I recorded my death by creeper. Before that I was in creative mode and I never placed a bed in the game and slept there for a night so that it would save my position. And once I respawned after my death, I respawned at the 0 coordinates of the world. And I couldn't find my perfect mountain anymore. So I didn't note down the coordinates or anything and yeah, I know. Shut up. But I had everything I needed. I went to After Effects for the compositing, keyed and positioned myself in the scene, and applied some preliminary color correction. In short, I tried to make each green screen shot appear as plausible as possible by adding some bells and whistles. There's a subtle lens flare over the sun to make the sunset even more gorgeous. And in the close-up shots, the bouquet in the background is 4-pointed, because we're in Minecraft and everything is made of squares. Just that fateful creeper shot from the game. It didn't work in the edit, at all. The problem with the creeper shot was that, for all trouble that it cost me, it didn't work anyway. So this is what you get when you work with creepers on set. They say don't work with animals or children or creepers. I didn't listen and that's the price I had to pay. So what to do if someone's a real diva on your set? Well, you replace them with CGI. For the POV shot from the creeper's perspective, I shot current fill from a lower angle and future fill directly from the floor up.
Hello there, little guy. Why so serious?
The creeper's texture I ripped straight from the game and modeled it in Maya. It's really just a bunch of cubes anyway. The final result I imported in After Effects where I did its little jumping animation. For the blinking rate I coded up this little expression that would just turn the texture white at a given interval. And now I had exactly the shot I wanted. The shot with a big explosion sending both versions of me flying was probably the hardest one for a number of reasons. For the explosion itself, I went online and shelled out some dough for a well-shot recording of an actual explosion in 4K resolution. Complete with alpha channel that I could put in as is, and it would work. To fake the explosion, lighting up its surroundings, I took different parts of this recording of the hilltop. The background is after nightfall, the portion that's lit up is the same shot just before nightfall and with an orange tint. And now I needed to get fill and future fill blown up in the air from the velocity of the blast. And just to get an understanding of the crappy footage I have to work with, this is what it looked like before. Yep, that's all. Not impossible, but not trivial either. A big problem was future fill getting cut off at the top in the jumping footage. Visual effects on a budget means to be very creative with your solutions, and this is really what I love about it, trying to squeeze out as much production value from what you got. My solution was a dynamic camera pullback with a shake that worked surprisingly well. I really hate animating in After Effects, especially in its clunky 3D space. But after a few hours of just tinkering with timing and position, it worked. I arrived at an arc that looked plausible enough for both current fill and future fill. The icing on the cake was to have future fill's coffee tumbler being blown away from the explosion, because the storyboard dictated that he wouldn't have his tumbler in the following scenes. In After Effects, it was the only real 3D object. An elongated soda can with a black shader that flew past the camera. All the other elements were just on 2D planes. Here's how the shot looks in After Effects from a different perspective. Having Future Phil pilfer elements from classic games was a real fun idea on paper. The execution wasn't that easy, but we will get to this right now. So let's first look at the MEGAMAN segment. I had the footage of Future Phil picking an imaginary element from the game, but no game footage at that point. Emulation to the rescue. I played and recorded a few levels of MEGAMAN and put the footage in After Effects, searching for an occasion where it would make sense for Future Phil to remove a platform. I was lucky, and in the Gutsman stage, the position of the platform and Future Phil's pinching fingers was almost a perfect match. I nudged the MEGAMAN footage around to sync up timing and position, and as soon as Future Phil would interact with it, I switched it over to a totally animated version of the game, so that the MEGAMAN sprite would drop accordingly. The platform also was just a cutout that I manually match moved with Future Phil's hand.
Let's take platforming from MEGAMAN.
The Metroid shot was much the same, but the biggest problem was that I didn't have any alternative shots of Future Phil with different hand placings of where he would be yanking the orb from the game, so I had to scale up the background of the gameplay. But still, it was not wide enough to fill the whole background. To account for this, I stitched together a wide version from still images of the footage. Stealing the item was pretty much the same as before with the MEGAMAN, only that the game needed to continue as if the item had never been there. Mercifully, with Metroid this was easy enough. When you pick up the Morph Ball upgrade, the game just stops and plays a jingle, and then continues like before. Cut out this pause and jingle, and put a black patch over the ball after Future Phil removed it, and you're done.
And the upgrade system from Metroid?
When it came to taking the pixel look from Chrono Trigger, I was a bit at a loss at how to visualize that line. I pondered a bit and imagined what Chrono Trigger would look like without the pixels, and what I came up with was a low poly version of it without any textures. I recorded the first 5 minutes of Chrono Trigger looking for an opportunity, and decided to rid Chrono's room of its art style while retaining all the objects. For that I went to Maya again, set the main camera isometric and put the screenshot in the background. For an hour, I modeled Chrono's room and furniture pixel perfect to the reference. My biggest troubles I had with Chrono himself, because I'm devoid of talent when it comes to character design and particularly character modeling. In my despair, I smashed some basic blocks together until it looked okay enough for the second it would be on screen. It did look okay, but frankly a bit too bland without textures. To make up for that, I placed some lights with shadows and rendered out the result with a good deal of ambient occlusion. In Photoshop, I cleaned up artifacts and errors and then imported the cleaned up image in After Effects. I experimented with an assortment of distortion effects that it would appear as if Future Phil was pulling the pixel look away like a tablecloth. In combination with this little swinging animation, I think it looks decent enough. Lastly, I sprinkled on a particle system that now there are literally pixels flying away.
The pixel look from Chrono Trigger?
The time tunnel was a lower priority for me, mostly because I had no idea how I wanted it to look. I played around in Maya until I came across something cool enough. Here's another view of it. The tunnel simply is a writhing pipe with an animated UV map and some animated Brownian noise as displacement. I rendered the animation with different procedural textures, a depth pass and a Fresnel pass. I combined them all in trusty After Effects and generously applied glow, and for the background it looked good enough. A subtle rumble on the camera was the icing. I knew from the start that I had a lot of transitions into and out of the time tunnel. Instead of redoing the same effect over and over, I automated the whole process as much as possible with After Effects expressions. Now I had one slider and one position control, and the effect would happen automatically. Between the takes when shooting the time tunnel scenes, I was joking around with Connie, and we came up with this little backstory for a future Phil, because we figured that he probably couldn't afford a big time tunnel all by himself, so he would actually piggyback on someone else's. I did some alternative takes of the characters evading another commuter in the time tunnel. The TARDIS, as in the title sequence of Doctor Who. And for that to happen, I had to model and texture it. There are plenty of references to be found on the web and even a mock blueprint. Overall, it's just a blue box, so modeling it took no longer than 1.5 hours. Texturing was equally swift. It's mostly blue wood and the sign on the front. From Maya, I exported the model as an OBJ to After Effects, as I figured it would be easier to animate with the foreground and effects already present. I don't know, have I already mentioned that I find the animation curves in Adobe After Effects atrocious and that they should burn in a fire? Needless to say that it took me relatively long until the animation looked fluid enough to put it in the shot. Final touches consisted of this big Whovian lens flare and bolts of lightning. And that's it with this video. Next time, in the last part of the series, we'll be looking at sound and audio and how finishing such a big project looked from my perspective. Thank you also if you're a Patreon supporter, it really means a lot to me. Thanks to anyone who bought me a cup of coffee or a candy bar. You can do this by going to pixelprophecy.com/donate and yeah, just pick a little something you want me to receive. Yeah, so thank you and see you next time for the last part in the series. Cheers!